Thank you. And I want to say welcome to you all. This is my city. This is Washington, D.C. This is where I have the honor and privilege of being a weaver in our city. And I am encouraged. I was speaking to Kim, and I was just encouraged just to see this room filled with people from all over America. So can we give it up for everybody that's here? I pray that you're all encouraged, because I definitely am encouraged. So I get to be a weaver here in Washington, D.C. I had an honor and privilege of being able to serve at the D.C. Dream Center. It's here in Southeast D.C. That's where we have been for 23 years. How I get to be a weaver is by listening and earning trust to build relationship so that people can allow me into their lives so I can earn that right to be heard to share Jesus. So I get to meet the practical needs to building relationship with people. That's what I get to do every single day. So whether it takes the form of a mentoring program or after school program, or maybe it takes the form of a community fellowship or a block party, that's how I get to weave the community for the name of Jesus here. And it's all about love. So I realize that you all will probably have very similar stories, but I've had the privilege of being able to kick you all off. So thank you so much, David. Thank you everyone from Aspen for getting us here. And Kim, it's on you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kim. I'm from Chicago. Woo, Chicago! And I get to weave the LGBTQ people by first insisting that those are but a few of the letters, and they each has a rich history and an unknown but undeniable future. And I use all of this complexity in service to a liberation in which no community is left behind. Thank you all.
Hello, I'm Matt Zaynard from McCook, Nebraska, and I get to weave people with food, music, and art. And over the years, our music venue, bakery, cafe has become a place that's safe and a comfortable gathering space for our community. And I'm part of a group of weavers who create a listening room that invites people to come together and share music and food and conversation and drink. And then another group that has a 23-year-old storytelling festival in our community. And then we also are trying to make a new maker space. So if anybody has done artist in residence or something like that, please let me know. We need some help with that. One of my favorite folk singers, Daryl Scott, said, "Fritters make friends." We take that to heart, and we invite all of you to come to McCook, Nebraska to share apple fritters.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Awesome. So my name is Dina. I was originally born in Morelos, Mexico, and there you go, my people. Woo! I now consider Greenville, South Carolina my hometown. It's the next big new small city. So check us out on social media. But the way I get to weave people and the way I get to work with people, it's like this, talking. I feel like I get to be really open with people right away. We click, somehow it just happens. It might be my Latino thing, I don't know. But it's really important because in South Carolina, being an immigrant, being in the South, you're at a really neat spot where opportunities are limited. And as one of those outliers that got to go through undergrad, got to go through all these other things, I get to create those opportunities for other people. So I get to speak. I get to speak to young ones, older ones, big ones. I'm talking to the adults, and create that hope, create that system to be able to open more doors and to ignite energy into our newer generation of Latino, brown, white, any color, and any identity that they represent. So thank you so much for coming over, and let's weave more people, guys.
Hello, I'm Mike Malcolmus. I'm in the 3rd Ward of Houston, Texas. And we weave down there in the community by building a private and public partnership between universities and hospitals and our early childhood school to study the effects on young kids and education under continuous stress in the hopes to build an evidence-based, trauma-informed, social-emotional learning curriculum that can be scaled out to affect tens of thousands of kids around the country.
I'm Roseanne Haggerty from Hartford, Connecticut, and Community Solutions, and my colleagues and I weave the people by training local weavers in 74 communities around the country and how to eliminate homelessness. In these 74 places, we train them in how to collaborate to fix the problems that leave their neighbors homeless. And they're not just showing that homelessness is a solvable problem, they're actually solving it. The first 10 communities, through these new relationships and new commitments, have ended chronic and veteran homelessness.
I weave you guys. I can't tell you, for all of us on the Weave team, it's actually amazing to see you all. We've visited you in places around the country, and to see you all here it makes the heart swell. My wife and I had our wedding reception in this room, so this is the second happiest I've ever been in this room. Now, before I get started, there are some people to thank. First, some organizations who have been on this journey with us: YMCA, Nextdoor, Facebook, the Einhorn Family Trust, Better Angels, you'll hear from later tonight, the Bridge Alliance, and State Farm. They've been valued partners, and we've got other supporters who are in the room who've been very, very generous to us. Aspen, run by Dan, who you'll hear from later, has been amazing, an amazing home for the past year. The Community Strategies Group, Latinos in Society, Urban Innovators, Sports in Society, the College Excellence Program, and the Leadership Division, who is sitting right there. And then the Weave team. I didn't believe in Superman until I met Tommy Loper, right there. But Tommy, Crystal, Michael, there are many of them around. We've got these orange lanyards. If the Weave team could all stand up or somehow make themselves be present. Michael, April, Elizabeth, Isabel. If you have any issues with them, with anything, any real problems, don't go to me, go to them. Now, it's actually kind of unusual that I would be in any sort of Weave community. I am not the most socially extroverted person on the face of the earth. When I was 7, I read a book called Paddington the Bear, and I decided at that moment I wanted to become a weaver, or a writer, I mean, not a weaver, a writer. Sort of solitary profession. When I was in high school, I wanted to date this woman named Bernice. She didn't want to date me. She wanted to date some other guy, and I remember thinking, what is she thinking? I write way better than that guy. And so my values were writerly values. And then when I was 18, the admissions officers at Columbia, Wesleyan, and Brown decided I should go to the University of Chicago, which is also a bit of a heady, solitary place. The saying about Chicago, it's where fun goes to die. My favorite saying about it is it's a Baptist school where atheist professors teach Jewish students St. Thomas Aquinas. And so that, it's solitary. And I led a solitary life when I was in Chicago. I had a double major in history and celibacy while I was there. And then I went off and became a journalist. And being a journalist is for people who are a little detached. I always tell journalism students, if you're at a football game and everybody's doing the wave and you don't do the wave, then you have the right kind of aloof personality type to be a journalist, because we just watch. And so a sort of emotional reserve is powerful when you're a journalist or you're a writer. Or as Gary Shandling put it, my friends tell me I have an intimacy problem, but they don't really know me. So then you get off and you start actually being a writer, and you spend a lot of time alone. John Cheever is a great short story writer. He lived in New York. He would wake up in the morning at 6:30 in the morning. He'd put on a suit and tie. He'd take the elevator down to the basement of his building where he had an office. He'd take off the suit and tie, right in his underwear. At 12:30, he'd put back on the suit and tie and ride upstairs. And that's the solitary life of a writer. And so you do that for a while, and then you succeed, and it's weirdly more isolating still. I was hired as a conservative columnist at the New York Times, a job I likened to being the chief rabbi at Mecca, not a lot of company there. And then I worked for a sort of a cerebral show called The NewsHour on PBS. And we thank you. We cater to a certain demographic, which is what we call seasoned youth. And so if a 93-year-old lady comes up to me in the airport, I know what she's going to say. I don't watch your show, but my mother loves it. And so That's a little solitary. And then if you make it, there's weirdly disorienting. So my last book did well commercially, and I was on a book tour for 99 consecutive days. And I counted in the middle of that period 42 consecutive meals that I ate alone at an airport, a hotel, or an airline. And when you're that alone that much, you really are off the rails. I remember I saw a picture of Britney Spears that shaved off all her hair, and I was like, yeah, I could do that. I'm there. And so that's a solitary game. So I'm affected by that, but then I'm affected by our wider culture. And our wider culture is based on a series of lies which tends to detach us one from another. One of those lies is career success can make you feel happy and fulfilled, and I'm living proof that's not necessarily true. The second lie is I can make myself happy. That's the lie of self-sufficiency, that if I could just lose 15 pounds, score another victory, be good at yoga, then I'd be happy. But when we talk to people at their end of their life, and everybody in this room can attest, you're most happy when you defeat self-sufficiency and when you become dependent on one another in deep relationship. The third lie is that life is an individual journey towards success. You may have seen this book, Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. It suggests the kid graduates from school and has a series of experiences on the way to success. The kid has no family, no friends, no relationships. I ran into a researcher a couple weeks ago who said immigrant communities don't like this book because that's not how they see life. And so it's about relationship. And then there are the lies of the meritocracy. The emotion of the meritocracy is conditional love, that you can earn your way to love. The anthropology of the meritocracy is you're not a soul to be saved, you're a set of skills to be maximized. The judgment of the meritocracy, which we pretend not to admit, is that people who are successful and smarter are worth a little more than everybody else. And these are poisons in our culture. And so they shape a lot of people, and they distort a lot of things, and they distorted me. I had every blessing you can imagine. I had an extremely lucky career. I've had an extremely lucky career. And yet, what happens is you come to idolize, for me, I would say I came to idolize time over people. I came to idolize productivity, being on the move, over having relationships. And so there was always this inner clock in my head. And so people knew not to confide in me because I was always on the move. And I grew up in a very loving home, but not emotionally expressive. And so I'm raised in a certain way, and I'm part of a certain culture, and you think you're playing the game, but the game is playing you. And so when you do that, you live a life that's unsustainable. And so it happened to me in 2013. I fell into a valley. And so the wages of sin are sin. You end up paying for it at the end if you live by values that are not the best values. And so my kids had left home or were leaving home. My marriage had ended. I was no longer conservative in any real sense, so I'd lost all those friendships of the movement that I used to be a part of. And so I was living in an apartment on Wisconsin Avenue here in the district, and I never had anybody over. I just worked. And so if you opened up the drawer where I should have had silverware, I had Post-it notes. And if you opened up the drawer where I should have had plates, I had stationery, because I was just working. Work is a very effective way to avoid any spiritual or emotional problem. And the weird thing is I was going through this valley of disconnection. A lot of people were going through that valley. I'm a pretty average person. So you look around the country, and I don't need to tell the people in this room this situation, but 35% of Americans over 45 are chronically lonely. 55% of Americans say no one knows me well. In 1970, married couples entertain in their homes about 20 times a year. Now it's down to 8. Only 8% of Americans say they have important conversations with their neighbors. The fastest growing political party is unaffiliated. The fastest growing religious movement is unaffiliated. Since 1999, suicide rates have gone up by 30%, and suicide is a proxy for loneliness. Teenage suicide rates since 2011 have gone up 70%. And so these are all proxies for disconnection, and that's what's happening in society. The American lifespan is dropping, not rising. And so we have an era of distrust. If you ask Americans, do you trust your neighbors? A generation ago, 60% of Americans said, yeah, my neighbors are trustworthy. Now it's down to 32% and 19% of millennials. The younger you go down the age scale, the more distrust there is. And intermixed with that is some sort of spiritual crisis that's hard to define. But why, given all we know about human nature and the brain, are mental health problems rising, not falling? Why are depression rates rising, not falling? Every college I go to, the mental health facilities are swamped. So something is going on, and it's all about disconnection. So how do you get out of a valley? How do you get out of a personal valley, a hard time? How do you get out of a national valley? Over the last 5 or 6 years, I've become an expert in that. And so you can either be broken or you can be broken open. And some people we know are broken. They have a hard time, they turn afraid, bitter, resentful, and they tend to lash out. There's a great saying, pain that is not transformed gets transmitted. People pass it along. But some people get broken open. What happens, Paul Tillich is a 1950s theologian, and he says what happens in the moments of suffering, it interrupts your life, and it reminds you you're not the person you thought you were. Moments of suffering, he says, carve through the floor of your basement of your soul, and they reveal a cavity below, and they carve through that floor, and they reveal a cavity below. You see into deeper parts of yourself than you ever saw before. And you realize that only spiritual and emotional food will fill those dark and deep places. And so what you discover is your heart. You get a little out of your ego, and you get first into your heart. And what the heart yearns for is fusion with another person. I love a quote. I love reading a quote from a guy named Louis de Bernier, who wrote a book called Captain Corelli's Mandolin. And in that book, he's got a guy talking to his daughter about his relationship with his late wife. And the guy says, love itself is what is left over when being in love is burned away. And this is both an art and a fortunate accident. Your mother and I had it. We had roots that grew towards each other underground, and when all the pretty blossoms had fallen from our branches, we found out that we were one tree and not two. And the heart yearns for that. The other thing you find out down there is the soul. Now, I don't ask you to believe in God or not to believe in God. I'll leave that to Ernest. But I do ask you to believe that you have a soul. I ask you to believe that there's some piece of yourself that has no size, weight, color, or shape, but is of infinite value and dignity. And the rich people don't have more of this than poorer people. Old don't have more than young. It's our soul. And what this rape is not just an assault on a bunch of physical molecules. It's an attempt to obliterate a human soul. Slavery is wrong because it's an insult to another human soul. And what the soul does, first, it gives us moral responsibility. A tiger is not morally responsible for what it does, but we are morally responsible. And the second thing it does, it gives us yearning. The soul yearns to serve some transcendent good. I've met a lot of people who have covered crime, I've covered wars, I've covered genocide. I've met a lot of bad people. I've never met a single person who didn't want their life to be good. And when they do bad things, they usually rationalize it in some way to say it was really good. We all have this yearning for good. We all want to serve some transcendent ideal. And the soul sings when it's serving some good. What Rabbi Wolf Kellman described, he was marching with King in Selma, and he later remembered the experience. He said, we felt connected in song to the transcendental, the ineffable. We felt triumph and celebration. We felt that things change for the good and nothing is congealed forever. That was the warmest, most transcendental spiritual experience. Meaning and purpose and mission were beyond words. Meaning was the feeling, the song, the moment of overwhelming spiritual transcendence. And we all yearn for that. And you are in this work because you yearn for that. The second, so what you have to do in those moments of suffering is you go down into those deep places and you realize something Einstein said, which is that you're never going to solve the problem you're in at the same level of consciousness that you created it at. You have to get a bigger consciousness. And that's what suffering does if you're lucky. I have a friend named Catherine Cox who said that when her first daughter was born, she realized she loved her more than evolution required. And I've always loved that sentiment because it describes to us what's at the core of ourselves, which is what Annie Dillard calls our inexplicable caring for one another. We care for each other more than we really have to. Penguins are very loyal to each other. What we have is better. And when you get down at the substrate, you really are down at the core of yourself and you're operating out of your depths and not from your shallows. The second thing I learned at the Valley is that you can't pull yourself out. Somebody has to reach down and pull you out. And I happen to be lucky in 2013, I got invited to a home of a couple here in DC named Kathy and David. You'll meet Kathy tomorrow. And they had a kid named Santi who went to DC public schools. And Santi had a friend named James whose mom had some health and other issues. And James sometimes needed a place to live and a place to eat. And they said, James can come over to our house. And then James had a friend, and that kid had a friend, and that kid had a friend. And before long, by the time I went to dinner there on Thursday night in 2013, there were like 30 kids around the dinner table and 15 or so sleeping around various parts of the house, it seemed. The community is called AOK, and you're going to meet a bunch of AOK kids this week. I walk in the door, uptight, middle-aged white guy. I reach out my hand to one of the kids and to shake his hand, introduce myself, and he says, we don't really shake hands here. We hug here. And I'm not the huggiest guy on the face of the earth, but I've been hugging every Thursday night for 6 years at AOK. And what we do with the technology, every organization here has a technology of convening. The technology of convening at this place is the dinner table. We have the same meal every Thursday, chicken and black rice, and we go around the table and we just put our shit on the table. Sometimes it's really good. Somebody passed a GED, somebody qualifies training for the fire department. Sometimes it's bad. It's depression, it's a teenage pregnancy. One of the young ladies, her kidney failed. And so David, the father figure, gave her a kidney. And you go through all that stuff together. I took my daughter there, and she said, that's the warmest place I've ever been in my life. I took a friend of mine, some of you may know, named Bill Milliken from Communities and Schools, and he told us something he says all the time, which is that I've been doing youth work for 50 years. I've never seen a program turn around a life. I've only seen relationships turn around lives. And so we build relationships. And what the kids gave me was first emotional transparency, and second, a complete intolerance of social distance. They do not allow you to be distant. They just turn to you, pour love into you, and you give it back. And so AOK, this little community, came in and showed me a better way to live. And I would write my columns about social disconnection during the daytime, and go to dinner at Thursday night at AOK. I said, this is the answer. And the good thing is that AOK is not rare. There's weavers everywhere. In our little journey, we travel to big cities and to small towns, and we just ask who is trusted here. And we came up with people, 75 people just like that. And I'm not going to tell your stories, but a lot of you are in this. Aisha Butler from Chicago. I don't know where Aisha is. There she is right there. I'll let Aisha tell her story. Sam Harris, I don't think here is. He runs a gym in North Carolina, South Carolina, and teaches kids boxing, but really not boxing. He teaches them life. Mac McCarter is right over there. Mac can tell his story, but how many volunteers do you have in your organization? 50,000 in Shreveport, Louisiana. Stephanie Ruzek is somewhere around here. I don't know where she is, but Stephanie runs an after-school program in Houston. I wanted to call our organization not Weave, I just wanted to call it a nation of Stephanies. Because if we had a nation of Stephanies, we'd be okay. Some have had bad experiences. Darius lost a dad. You'll meet Sarah Atkins, who lost some kids in the worst way imaginable. But what I found and what we found traveling around the country is similar values. We'd be in red America, we'd be in blue America. We heard the same gospel. We met people who had moral motivations. The economists tell us we're motivated by the desire for money, power, and status. In my experience, the people in this room are not motivated by any of those things. Are motivated by the desire to be in right relationship with other and to serving some good cause. Vocational certitude. The weavers we met know why they were put on this earth. It's not just a temporary thing for them. Somewheres, not anywheres. People deeply planted in their place. We met a guy in Youngstown, Ohio, who just started his career by holding up a sign in Youngstown. It's in the town square, it says, "Defend Youngstown." Walkout experiences. A lot of people walked out of corrupt systems to enter a better system. Radical hospitality. If somebody knocks on the door, they always open it. Treating the whole person, not just the brain, but the whole person. Radical mutuality. We're not better than, we're not serving, we're all walking together. Lisa Fitzpatrick, who's here, said, I don't do things for people, I just do things with people. At root, deeply relational, putting relationship over self. One of the organizations I really love is run by a woman named Mary Gordon. It's called Roots of Empathy. And what Roots of Empathy does is they teach kids how to feel empathy. And what they do is they take a kid in a classroom, they take a mom and an infant, they put them in a classroom, and they have the 8th graders surround the infant. And they have to guess what the infant is thinking as it crawls around and reaches for things. It's a way of teaching empathy. And in one of the days, they had a kid named Darren who was in this class. And Darren had been through the foster care system. And he asked the mom if he could hold the infant. And Darren was bigger than everybody else because he'd been held back several times. And the mom was a little nervous, but she let him hold the infant, and he was great with the baby. He cuddled on his chest. He walked it around over the windowsill, showed it outside, and then handed it back to the mom. And then he started asking questions about parenthood. And the final question was, if nobody has ever loved you, do you think you can be a good father? And so that's what Sarah Moore is doing. She's reaching down into the valley and pulling up Darren. And so that, I think, is what all of you do. You all put relationship over self. You're relationalists, you're not individualists. And somehow, we need to take what you do and scale. I often got the sense on our journeys, I'd visit organizations like the ones you're a part of, and it would be like Italian village hilltops. On the village, it looked great, but there are still a lot of valleys in between. So how do we get this effect to the valleys? And so the central challenge, I guess, two is, one is relationships are very intimate, take a long time to develop, and they're extremely local. Relationships don't scale, but norms scale. If you can change the norms and the culture of society, then you can really have a gigantic effect. So how do we take your examples and change the culture? You've got to think about the whole thing. I know everybody's super focused on their own organization, but we have to, as Mac McCarter says, you can't only clean the part of the swimming pool you're swimming in. You got to clean the whole pool. And so somehow we have to find a way to change the culture. And that's really what this is about. This is a chance for us to talk about it. We don't know exactly how to do it. We've gathered you people here to help think this problem through. How to take disassociated great organizations and see if we can cohere into a movement. I have some inklings about what to do. There's a role for people like me who are illuminators, who just shine a light and saying, look at those people, look at what they're doing, they are cool. It's ridiculous that we in the media mostly cover stories that make everybody feel disempowered. But that's what we do. Another job is to synthesize and name the values that drive us. Another job is to tell common stories. A community is a group of people organized around a common story. Another is to learn from each other. How do we do the stuff we do? Find common projects. A community is a group of people who build things together. Create hubs where decentralized networks can come together and gather like this one. And so this gathering is designed to start that process. It's designed to see if we can come together and have some sort of broader effect, cumulatively self-replicating on the whole culture. And so this conference is designed not to be a conference, but more like a congress. More like somebody where everybody is a speaker, where we hope everybody will get up and speak. This is the longest speech you'll hear in the next 3 days. So today, our question for today is, who are we? Are we really one group? I sometimes say this is a movement that doesn't know it's a movement. And so I'd like today to explore our common values, explore the things we have in common together, and have some shared moments. Tomorrow, the central question is, how do we do the things we do? There are certain practical challenges that most of the people in this room face, and everybody has a piece of the answer, and the idea is practically, how do we face common challenges? How do we do the things we do? And so it's meant to be a sharing of wisdom. And then Thursday is, where do we go from here? How do we take what we have? What do we do to turn a group of disparate organizations into a coherent movement? What does a movement look like? And what does a movement need? Now, in the days coming up, leading up to today, I've really been feeling much more radicalized. I want to be shy. I don't want to be an egomaniac and say, I'm starting a movement. We're going to start a movement together. We're all doing this great heroic thing. The impulse is to say, oh, I'm just doing a little thing. I've decided to screw that. We're going to try to do something big. And, you know, in 1962, some students from Michigan went to Port Huron, Michigan, issued the Port Huron Statement, and then they created the New Left. And what they did is very impressive. A group of economists went to Montpellier, and I think it's in Switzerland in 1948. They essentially created the conservative movement. Feminists went to Seneca Falls. Civil rights movement went to the Philip Randolph Leadership Center. There are founding moments when people come together and they have, it's not where they complete the job, it's where they begin the job. And so I'd love to think this is that. Maybe we'll fail, but we'll have given it a shot. And we're doing it because there should be more weavers. Everybody should be enmeshed in a weave. You think of all the lonely people in this city and in this country and this world, they should be weavers. You think of the people who are wondering if their life has meaning, who feel depressed and wonder what their telos, their purpose is. Those people should be weavers. I work in politics most of the time. It's filled with angry tribal people who feel that morality is more about denouncing somebody else than it is about compassion and mercy and grace. They should be weavers. The people in this room, for all of us on the Weave team, you people have already changed our lives. This has been a transformational year for me, and I think I can speak for all of us. I look at all these familiar faces, just being with you for a couple hours sometimes just a dinner, sometimes seeing where you work, it has a transformative effect. That should happen to the whole country. It's an answer for us personally, it's an answer for us nationally. It should be a place where we sink down into our heart and soul, live out of those better desires, and we all say we are weavers. So that's what I'm asking you to do the next 3 days. Thank you.